Focus on Headline. And let's take a look at what major issues are making the headlines today on Focus on Headline. For this, joining us in the studio, we have our reporters in Yoon Se-young and Choi Ji-hee. Guys, welcome back.
Good evening.
And Ji-hee, I have to say, happy belated birthday to you.
Thank you so much.
I was like, why is she looking so nice? It is a day after her birthday. So you have to look nice on the day of your day after your birthday. No, we missed your birthday yesterday, so I just want to take the...
It was 2 days before.
Was it 2 days ago?
Yes.
I apologize.
How could you
I don't even know. Is it? Oh, it's
remember Jihee's birthday? It's like national
celebratory day.
Is this North Korea? Is this North Korea where people's birthdays is a national holiday? I apologize. 2 days ago, it was Jihee's birthday. You know what? I can't keep track with a whole bunch of people, but I do wish you a happy belated birthday. I'm sure our listeners are going to be sending a whole bunch of those as well. Well, we're not going to be talking about why Jihee's birthday should be a national holiday, but something that is of a big concern. We have been talking about this for years now, and as we are now in that spring season when we were expecting this to happen, we're talking about Japan, of course, releasing the contaminated nuclear water from the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. IAEA recently released a report concluding that the monitoring system of the Japanese authorities is reliable. We should trust it and let them release this water. Ji-hee, you're going to start us off.
Right. So the International Atomic Energy Agency, or IAEA, verifying the treatment process of the contaminated water from the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant following the Japanese government's decision to discharge this into the sea this year. The organization evaluated the Japanese authorities' discharge monitoring system as reliable through an interim report. However, in relation to the Radiation Environmental Impact Assessment, or REIA, which deals with the impact of the discharge of contaminated water, it was suggested that additional explanations were needed on the methodology used to measure the concentration of radioactive materials in the water. The IAEA released its fourth report on the 5th, based on experts conducting field investigations to verify the treatment process of the water. And the report was basically based on the investigations that were made by the IAEA experts during their visit to Japan last November. Now, the contents of additional field investigations by the experts, or the results of the investigations on the seawater samples, will be released on the 5th and the 6th reports, after which the final report of the investigation will be released. Now, much of this report, the fourth report, was devoted to verifying and evaluating the system for monitoring the discharge process of the seawater by Japanese authorities, including TEPCO. And the report said that based on information supplemented by the Japanese side in accordance with the request of the IAEA, it was confirmed that the program established by TEPCO to monitor the environmental impact after the discharge of contaminated water had a reliable and sustainable radiation protection system in place. Now, it was also evaluated that significant progress had been made in the process of supplementing the monitoring plan after listening to the suggestions made by the experts in IAEA. Now, the opinions of experts who believe that there is no need for further technical review of such a plan are also included in the report. However, the report also suggests that supplementary explanations from Japan are needed for some matters related to the REIA as well. And among the matters in need of supplementary explanation include more improved explanation for excluding the intake of fish caught 3 kilometers from the coast. And the report explained that the request for additional clarification, however, does not affect whether TEPCO complies with IAEA's international safety standards and is intended to allow experts to better understand TEPCO's plans. Now, it explains that most of the radionuclides have been removed from this water, by a multi-nuclide removal system. And this also is why the Japanese side calls the water treated water instead of the contaminated water, as we call it. However, even after this purification process, there's still the radioactive material tritium that remains, and the Japanese government plans to dilute this concentration of tritium, and they have a strict standard for that. And the IAEA has been working to verify that these initiatives do not adversely affect the environment as a whole, and it's to analyze the characteristics of the radioactivity of contaminated water and to consider the impact that the overall discharge process will have on the surrounding environment, which will obviously affect our country as well.
Yeah, so the conflicting reports that we've been getting, the IAEA has long been in support of Japan releasing their contaminated water. And so we've also had some reports and some analysis from other experts who are saying that basically the contaminated water being released into the ocean is not going to be good for any of us, right? And so you mentioned tritium here, and this is not the first time I mentioned this, but this is chemistry 101 once again. By the way, I was terrible in chemistry. The half-life of tritium is 12.33 years, right? Just over 12 years. And so that means it takes 12 years for tritium to decay half of its original amount. Now, that also means that if you want to get it completely eliminated, it takes more than it will come out to about 24 and a half years for it to be completely gone. But unfortunately, what we've seen in a lot of the ocean, simulations and how the water moves and things like that, it is going to be far less than 24 years for all this contaminated water to affect oceans near South Korea, China, Russia, even the west coast of the United States, which is the big concern. And they mentioned the fish that's being caught off the coast of Fukushima, but they've had reports in the past where the rockfish that they caught, not even, it was about 3 kilometers, less than 3 kilometers off the coast, was heavily contaminated. And so this is the reason why even the Fukushima fisheries people have been very much against the release of this. But again, if the IAEA says it's okay, seems like Japan is going to go ahead in releasing this. In the meantime, a group of main opposition Democratic Party's lawmakers, they actually left for Japan on Thursday. This is in relation to Tokyo's plan to discharge this contaminated water. Seung, you have more on this trip.
Yes, a group of lawmakers from the DP's task force on Thursday departed for a 3-day trip to Japan to deliver South Korea's serious concerns over Japan's planned release of radioactive wastewater into the sea. After meeting with a group of experts on civil society and nuclear power plant safety in Tokyo, they plan to visit TEPCO's headquarters without having a face-to-face meeting with the officials there and deliver the request from DP lawmakers in writing and ask for data on the nuclear power plant and the contaminated water that are about to be released very soon. Then, on Friday, which is tomorrow, DP lawmakers will visit the crippled power plant and conduct an on-site investigation. They're also planning to meet with Fukushima local councillors, residents, and workers to hear their opinions on the contaminated water being released into the sea.
Well, Seung, Ji did report just before that the IAEA has already evaluated it. They said the monitoring system is reliable, we should trust it, and so forth. But what is the reason for why the opposition party needs saying that they need additional data, and this is quite necessary?
Well, first, Japan has announced that it will release more than 1 million tons of water into the sea from the destroyed Fukushima nuclear power plant this spring, which is now. And the reason why Tokyo has not started releasing the contaminated water is because the G7 is about to be held next month, and many predict that the discharge will begin immediately after G7 summit, so we do not have enough time to stop it. So South Korea's National Assembly has repeatedly asked the government for its own investigation data and countermeasures against Japan's plan. But what the opposition party argues is that the government continues to give the same answer, that is, we will continue to review. And according to DP, as the planned release is just around the corner, that should not be the answer because it cannot satisfy the public. And like mentioned already, IAEA so far has conducted several investigations and gave a positive assessment for Japan's monitoring system. But since it is the neighboring countries that will be directly affected if contaminated water is discharged, the neighboring country's own investigation must also be carried out. And in other words, cooperating with international organization is important, but should not be entirely dependent on the IAEA. Plus, since the issue is directly related to people's health, releasing transparent data to the public based on the investigation done by its own country and receiving the public's opinions regarding the issue is the most important part when it comes to making the decision of releasing wastewater into the ocean. And this also includes Japanese citizens as
and
well.
that's the other kind of curious aspect of things is what do people of Japan feel about this? I believe there was a survey that was done by, I believe, Tokyo, I forget which one it was. But they were saying the vast majority of the people in Japan are for the release of the contaminated water, but it's kind of specifically from the people of Fukushima who are very much against this. And what they're concerned about is the image of their agriculture and fisheries. And they were saying that in the past 10 years, they have to fight this image of, fish coming out, seafood coming from Fukushima. And once they release it again, no one's going to want to buy seafood from there as well. And it is also interesting that they're saying that again, we don't know the whole reason, but why are they doing this after the G7? If it's safe and okay, it wouldn't matter if they release it before the G7. But despite these claims, there are also concerns over the effectiveness of DP lawmakers' visit to Japan this time. It's not like the ruling party is going. It's not like the Yoon administration is going, because they're saying that, well, they've actually failed to set up a meeting with officials from TEPCO, right?
Right. In this regard, the ruling party also criticized DP lawmakers' visit to Tokyo as shameful and damaging to the national interest. In response, however, the Democratic Party said what's more important than meeting with leading politicians in person is to directly convey and express the concerns of South Korean people.
Yeah, and TEPCO has, no reason to meet a opposition party lawmakers. If it was maybe the ruling party and it's right from the Yoon administration and from like the environment ministry or something, then it probably would make sense. But certainly, TEPCO definitely does not have any reasons to meet them. In the meantime, a delegation of bipartisan lawmakers, not to mention business leaders, they'll be joining President Yoon Suk-yeol on his trip to the United States, which is going to, of course, take place later this month. Let's hear more about the schedule of this, Ji.
Sure. So for President Yoon Suk-yeol's state visit to the United States at the end of this month, the presidential office decided to review the possibility of having a delegation of the ruling and opposition parties come along with him. Now, recognizing that there are certain matters that must be settled to strengthen the ROK-US alliance and economic security issues as well, the office acknowledged the need for lawmakers to also actively participate in the diplomatic schedule along with the president. Now, an official regarding this matter said the president's office is preparing to form a bipartisan delegation to visit the United States, and it said that the presidential office is contacting lawmakers who will accompany President Yoon, centering on members of the Korea-U.S. Congressional Diplomacy Forum, which is a diplomatic group for the U.S. Congress in particular. Now, the South Korean business community is also gearing up to boost economic ties with the U.S. ahead of the president's visit as well. According to multiple sources from the conglomerate circle, the head of international affairs at the Federation of Korean Industries, or FKI, a business lobby group in Korea, flew to the U.S. last weekend to prepare for the meetings between Korean and American businesses. Now, the preparation comes as Korean business leaders are expected to meet their counterparts as well as they accompany President Yoon in the 5-day visit. This will take place from the 24th to the 28th of this month. And the chiefs of 4 major conglomerates, including Samsung Electronics, SK Group, Hyundai Motor Group, and LG Group, will be taking place, and they are included in this delegation. And they had accompanied the president on his visit to Japan as well earlier in March. Now, the chiefs will likely meet with business heads of the U.S. Intel, IBM, Qualcomm, and General Motors. The business delegation is also expected to talk with U.S. politicians to ensure that Korean companies are not, once again, affected by the U.S. laws such as the CHIPS Act and guidelines concerning the Inflation Reduction Act.
Of course, we have often seen in a lot of President Yoon's overseas trips, these business leaders make their trip as well. There's a lot of businesses to be won, and especially when President Yoon has pegged himself as the number one Korean salesman, there's certainly a lot of business to be earned. I just want to make this mention of this, and this is probably why I failed chemistry. One of our listeners out there, Michael Jones, in regards to the half-life of tritium that we talked about. Michael Jones says, hi, just a small correction. I don't think that's how half-life works. After 25 years, it will be 75% gone because the half-life will be 12.5 years, and then half of that will take another 12.5 years. So it actually would take more than 25 years for it to be completely gone. But Michael, thank you very much. I failed chemistry. I just put it at that. But
and what's really concerning is that once it's released, it's really hard to track, right? So we never know what's going to happen in even after 25 years or so.
Yeah, and all the raw fish I used to enjoy, all the seafood I used to enjoy. I don't know what's going to happen. That's the other aspect, right? Salt is the other thing. So, Michael, thank you very much. I'm sure your chemistry grades were much better than mine. I was not a very good chemistry student. In the meantime, top nuclear envoys of South Korea, the U.S. and Japan, they met face-to-face in Seoul on this Thursday. This to share their assessment of the situation on the Korean Peninsula. They've discuss ways to respond to North Korea's continued provocations. Hyung, you have more on this.
Yes, Kim Gun, Special Representative for Korean Peninsula Peace and Security Affairs on Thursday, met with U.S. Special Representative for North Korea Sung Kim and Japan's Takehiro Funakoshi, Director General of the Asian and Oceanian Affairs Bureau in Jongno-gu, Seoul, respectively. During the two separate meetings, Kim Gun reportedly discussed preparing for the North Korean provocation, believing that the level of provocation could increase soon ahead of some major events. North Korea has key anniversaries in April, including the Kim Il-sung's birthday. And this year, they are set to celebrate 111th anniversary of Kim Il-sung's birthday on April 15th, and the 11th anniversary of Kim Jong-un's appointment as the first secretary of the Workers' Party on April 11th. On top of that, as we know, Yoon-Biden summit in Washington is also scheduled for late April, marking the 70th anniversary of their alliance. So bilateral meeting between the leaders of South Korea and the U.S. is the biggest event for South Korea diplomatically and politically. And at the same time, for North Korea, such event can be used as an excuse to raise the level of provocation and nuclear threats. So there's a concern about further provocations by North Korea this month.
Yeah, again, so we often say, I know this is very contrasting words here, but North Korea is both very predictable and very unpredictable, right? And so one of the patterns that we've seen back in 2016 when they conducted their nuclear test, and then in 2017, I believe, it's when they kind of showcase whatever their technical nuclear weapons or whatever their nuclear capabilities, that's when they kind of showcase, that's when they conducted their nuclear test. And so the consensus right now is because North Korea has been showcasing a number of their nuclear capabilities, like, for example, the tactical nuclear weapons that they've seen, where the short-range ballistic missile, I believe, they're able to detonate it in mid-air, and then the one underwater and so forth. So a lot of experts are saying that maybe this is the year that North Korea does go ahead and conduct their 7th nuclear test. And can that happen when Yoon-Biden summit happen? That is the other question here. But different from what many did predict, North Korea did not make any noticeable provocations. If you remember last year when U.S. President Joe Biden visited Seoul and Tokyo. And this is another one of those things where they said, well, I mean, surely with Biden on the Korean Peninsula, they would not be that foolish and brazen to conduct a nuclear test. But again, another proof that North Korea is unpredictable and predictable at the same time, right?
Right. North did not fire missiles or anything provocative during Biden's visit to Seoul and Tokyo last year. But right after Biden returned home from his Asia trip, Pyongyang carried out an intensified military provocation by firing 3 missiles, including intercontinental ballistic missiles. So in that context, we can't leave out the possibilities of North Korea staging an armed demonstration before or after the Korea-U.S. summit as well. On top of that, North Korea's National Space Development Administration announced that it will complete the preparations for its first military reconnaissance satellite by this month, hinting that Pyongyang may launch its first military reconnaissance satellite as early as this year. So amid rising tensions, the chief negotiators of South Korea, U.S. today, agreed to step up efforts to pressure North Korea to stop its nuclear development. In particular, the allies will encourage the international community to thoroughly implement UN Security Council resolution. And top nuclear envoys of South Korea and Japan also emphasized the importance of cooperation between allies in order to unite the international community to respond to North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. The 3 senior representatives on North Korean nuclear issues will also hold trilateral talks on Friday, which is tomorrow in Seoul.
In the meantime, we have talked about this yesterday with our Taiwan correspondent, James Chater of Taiwan Plus. But Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen, her and U.S. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, they did meet on Wednesday, this in California. And this was a week after President Tsai was feted with New York with the Leadership Award, and this is the first highest level meeting since the two states made ties in 1979. So, Ji, you have more on this.
Right. So President Tsai and House Speaker McCarthy gathering in California a day earlier marked a representation of democratic solidarity between the two countries against China's threats. Now, this landmark meeting was the second time President Tsai has met with an American lawmaker of that rank in the space of a year, following a visit from then House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan in August. Now, Tsai is also the first president of Taiwan to meet with a U.S. House Speaker on American soil as well. And Tsai said in her remarks that it's no secret that today the peace we have maintained and the democracy which we have worked hard to build are facing unprecedented challenges. Then she went on to say, we once again find ourselves in a world where democracy is under threat and the urgency of keeping the beacon of freedom shining cannot be understated. And alongside her remarks, McCarthy said the friendship between the people of Taiwan and America is a matter of profound importance to the free world, and it's critical to maintain economic freedom, peace, and regional stability. Now, the meeting gave both the prominent figures an opportunity to emphasize and display the U.S.-Taiwan ties on the international stage. And Tsai added in her remarks an appreciation toward the ally, saying that the two states are stronger when they're together, and said in Taiwan's effort to protect their talked about Taiwan's efforts to protect their way of life, and said that it's grateful to have the U.S. by their side.
Now, if you remember last year when then U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan, I mean, it was met with China's condemnation. There was military drills that were being conducted in the region, and there was a whole lot of ruckus here. We knew that China was going to somehow respond to this meeting between Tsai and McCarthy, despite the fact that it's on U.S. soil. But what we did see is China issuing statements from different ministries, including the Foreign Ministry and Defense Ministry at the same time. Tell us more about this.
Right. In a spokesman's statement released on Thursday, China's Foreign Ministry harshly criticized the meeting between Tsai and McCarthy. It warned that China will take decisive and strong measures to protect the integrity of national sovereignty and territory in order to properly respond to Wednesday's meeting. Reuters also reported that, according to Taiwan Defense Minister on Thursday, China's aircraft carrier is currently 200 miles off Taiwan's east coast, which can be seen as a retaliatory measure. Under China's One China policy, China continues to claim Taiwan as part of its own, and the U.S. as well officially does not recognize Taiwan in consideration of its diplomatic relationship with China, although Washington continued its unofficial relationship with Taipei. For that reason, U.S. having an official meeting with Taiwanese leader in Washington signals its future stance, what kind of stance it will take in regards to Beijing's One China principle from now on. And although Tsai's visit to the U.S. is referred to as just a stopover on her week-long trip to Central America, and she was also reportedly known to be there to discuss the issue of removing double taxation for Taiwan's biggest foundry producer, TSMC. Considering the fact that it was the first time the highest-level meeting between Washington and Taipei took place since 1979, we can say that Wednesday's meeting signals a lot. In the meantime, Taiwan's former president Ma Ying-jeou, who is pro-China, visited mainland China late last month and received a head of state-level security and warm welcome by Beijing. And pundits say it's part of Beijing's efforts to have positive public sentiment in Taiwan and to help the Nationalist Party to take power in the presidential election next year. So at a time when the conflict between U.S. and China has already intensified, their conflicts over Taiwan issue is also expected to continue.
Yeah, and really a message to the current President Tsai Ing-wen, right? Basically saying this is the kind of the leader that we want in Ma Ying-jeou, and this is the kind of leader that we're going to continue to back. And we did mention yesterday with James Chater of Taiwan Plus that next year, January, I believe, is when the elections is happening. So going to be a lot of focus on that as well. Let's move on. We did talk about this briefly yesterday in the by-elections that took place. We were looking at a specific region here in South Korea. Well, we saw history being made, an unprecedented win over a seat by a candidate representing the minor progressive Jinbo party during the by-elections. Now, the area that we're talking about, I believe, is Jeonju-ul or B, right? And it's traditionally a very liberal state there, and so we knew that no PPP lawmaker or PPP representative was going to win this, but nevertheless, let's get the details of this.
Right. So the candidate we're talking about is Kang Sung-hee, who gave the Progressive Jinbo Party its first ever seat in the National Assembly by winning the parliamentary by-election, like you said, in Jeonju. So he won 39.07% of votes against independent candidate Im Jong-yup, who won 32.11% in the by-election, which was held in the southwestern city of Jeonju, and this area is about 190 kilometers south of Seoul. Now, Kang, who's 50 years old, graduated from the Hankuk University of Foreign Studies and was an executive member of a labor union of non-regular workers of Hyundai Motor, which is the country's leading automaker. Now, after his win, Kang expressed his gratitude to his supporters by saying, quote unquote, I believe Jeonju citizens demonstrated through Jinbo Party's Kang Sung-hee a desire to pass judgment on the prosecution dictatorship of Yoon Suk-yeol and a yearning for new politics. Now, Jeonju was the only city where a parliamentary by-election was held Wednesday, as former Representative Lee Sang-jik of the main opposition Democratic Party lost the seat in the city after he was sentenced to a suspended prison term last year for violation of the Public Official Election Act. Now, the Democratic Party did not nominate after this a candidate for the by-election to take political responsibility.
Again, so, Jeonju being, again, in the part of the Honam region that we often talk about, and being a traditional liberal area, they're just not going to pick the ruling PPP candidates here. And so what do? They go for the next liberal candidate, and it's the Jinbo Party here. Very unprecedented. Another area that we looked at was Ulsan City Superintendent of Education, and we have liberal candidate Chun Chang-soo, who was elected there for the by-election. Seong, you have more on this.
Yes, Ulsan is known as a conservative region, but Chun won over 61.9% of the votes on Wednesday, beating his rival conservative candidate with a wide margin. And the new Liberal Superintendent of Education said he considers the result of the election as a request from Ulsan citizens who believe that changes and innovations in education should continue.
Yeah, I believe the interesting thing with this is that, again, Ulsan is traditionally a conservative region, but the previous superintendent who passed away, I believe the now Chun, who was now elected, he is the husband of the former the superintendent here. So quite noteworthy, I think, and also very symbolic as well. In the meantime, let's move on to other stories here. South Korea planned to introduce investment projects in collaboration with the private sector to combat concerns of the slowing economic. We talked about the economic slowdown that we've been experiencing. Let's get more on this, Ji-hee.
Sure. So the finance ministry announced earlier today that it will unfold 13 trillion won, which is about 9.8 billion US dollars worth investment projects under ties with the private sector amid growing concerns over an economic slowdown in the country. Now, the decision came as the country is expected to see a continued slowdown in the economy in the first half of 2023 before gradually rebounding later in the year. Now, during a closed-door meeting on export matters, Finance Minister Kyung-ho said the latest measures focus on bolstering the fiscal capacity while addressing downside risks in the country's economy. Minister Choo added that the government will proactively revamp related policies to induce more people in the private sector to participate in the aforementioned projects. Now, the ministry said it will make sure existing projects are implemented at speed as well, hoping to achieve the goal of executing 8.9 trillion won worth of investment projects within the year. To revitalize the country's chip industry, as well as display and battery sectors, the government and companies will also speed up moves to create a research and development fund around 160 trillion won by 2027. And this includes 156 trillion won from the private sector as well. And also, due to the downturn of the world's chip market over an economic slowdown, we know that the exports of semiconductors has gone down significantly. It, in fact, came down by 4.5 billion to 8.6 billion US dollars from a year earlier, which is a form of security for a a year earlier. And the government will also increase its support for the shipbuilders as well with refund guarantees. And also the country's economy is estimated to have grown 2.6% on year in 2022, but this has slowed down from a 4.1% gain the previous year. And the Bank of Korea expects the country's growth to further slow down to 1.6% this year due to global monetary tightening measures. And the country's exports, in fact, fell for the sixth consecutive month in March, due mainly to weak global demand for semiconductors.
And that is going to be the continuous concern right now, because it doesn't seem like the demand for semiconductors is growing anytime soon right now. In the meantime, South Korean government will select the 100 future core technologies to secure the so-called super gap in Korea's three major technology fields, this including semiconductors, displays, and next-generation high-performance secondary batteries. This all sounds very complicated. Seong, tell us more about this.
Yes, like Ji-hee briefly mentioned, South Korea announced its goal to invest 156 trillion won, or 118 billion US dollars in R&D funds from the private sector and 4.5 trillion won from the government budget for 5 years until 2027. And the government also said it will launch a public-private research consultative body to help secure technology. This ambitious goal came from an emergency ministerial meeting on economy held this morning, and it is also part of South Korea's New Growth 4.0 strategy announced in February. The Ministry of Science and ICT explained that these three sectors are expected to be core industries of the nation's economy in the future, and that preemptive R&D investment based on public-private cooperation is urgently needed. Accordingly, the Ministry of Science and ICT has operated a task force team consisting of industry academic research experts in three fields since last year. And as mentioned several times on the show, Korea's export continues to see a steep drop, mainly due to its relations with China and a declining chip demand. And now with such moves, South Korea seems to try to respond to the changes in global market by investing and pioneering more in markets that will lead the nation's future economy.
There you have it, guys. Thank you as always for your reports. And G, once again, happy belated birthday to you. We had Soa drop in to say happy belated Jihi Day was how she called it. But,
National holiday.
Thank you.
it's a national holiday here, guys. Thank you very much. Stay safe. We'll see you guys again.
Thank you.
See you again.
You can listen to Korea Now with me, SJ Lee, by downloading the Arirang Radio application or tune in online by visiting www.arirangradio.com. So make sure you tune in Mondays through Fridays, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Korea time.